coffee.
The Broncos are going to lose today.
Never.
It's nothing special. Small. 49ers are biased on KD. That is a stupid idea. No. If I can't take it when my team, I'll give the coach the benefit of the doubt. Madden 21 was so bad.
I'm gonna so like I'm getting my body.
Has he played? Has he started in the
Right to tell ya.
Tag him on Instagram. Second, on all these tantrums. I could have. Monte Foreman coming out of Texas.
Truly appreciate that.
What's up, y'all? That one dude 2020 with the MI6 Sports Network here with a future NFL star, but my man, I want to make sure I pronounce your name correctly. How do people would pronounce it so that when we talk and interact either before or after that people know?
Yes, sir. My name is Kamel Douhne. A lot of people, get it wrong, but it's all good. But it's pronounced Kamel Douhne.
For people that out there know your story, I know part of what you're doing. I've seen who you are, but for the fans or people out there that really watch the draft or teens or anybody else, for people that may not know your story or what you're about or what is your story necessarily, or how did you get to where you are today preparing for the draft?
Well, so my story is very different than most people. I think it's probably, one in a million. And I don't say that just because it's my story, but this is actually the first interview that I have actually talked about my story. I've done a couple other interviews before. I attended the 2021 National Scouting Combine in Indianapolis this past March. And, I was interviewed for that and kind of talked about, my expectations, what I like about the position and, all that kind of stuff, teams and things like that. But, I've never really, dove into what my story is. My story is very different than most. And it's, and I don't really broadcast it. I don't really talk about it too much, but, I'm glad that I finally get to touch base with you a little bit and share a little bit of that story. I won't be going too deep into it, but it's just, I am on my way in pursuit of the NFL. That's ultimately the goal for me. The way that I've had to fight for that dream and the way I've had to go about trying to get to that dream is very different than most. I have not had the same path as most people. When I was very young, I was passionate about football. It was, the love of my life, the thing that I wanted to do with my life, no matter what. I've always said, I will play football for a janitor's salary. It's not about the money. It's not about any of the clout. It's not about anything that comes with the job. It's about the game. And through circumstances in my life, I was never able to fulfill that dream. I was never able to actually get out there on the field and play. And through a lot of family stuff, a lot of my culture, I'm a first generation Syrian American. My parents are from Syria. I was born here, raised in a completely different culture in a small town in North Georgia, where, there's one high school and just not a lot going on. Not a lot of people even going to college from the school that I graduated from. When I was there, the dropout rate was higher than the graduation rate. People weren't going to college. They were just trying to get graduated. And so coming from the background that I came from, opportunities were very slim. And it really has been just a thing where I've kind of, went to college, and I had a short time playing rugby in college. And then realized that, football was my dream. And in high school, I knew that. And I kind of, had this whole period of my life where I grew up overweight. I was always, the overweight guy, unathletic. And, I decided to change that when I was 17 years old to pursue my football dream. And I worked out, and in 2.5 months, lost 100 pounds. and then just started just going. I mean, I was working out 4 times a day, and just really just working hard for that dream. And ever since then, it's been obstacle after obstacle. I feel like I faced mountain after mountain to make this dream come a reality. I've faced adversity for people to take me serious, because not growing up in that sports background that most people who are chasing what I chase have, having that, time in middle school, high school, college, playing all those sports, and then me coming into a facility and saying, "Hey, I'm going to the NFL. I'm gonna pursue the NFL with everything that I have," and walking in and finding a trainer and finding a facility to train me and believe in me, and then now getting invites to combines and getting invites to tryouts and stuff like that. It's one of those things that when I don't really tell people the story, because it's like as soon as somebody hears the story, they want to automatically not believe in me when I try to show them first and then tell them the story. So I've had this pretty incredible past couple years now of training full time to go to the NFL, and not really having, and I played a little bit of semi-pro and stuff like that, kind of got my feet wet and that kind of thing. But if you could see from my highlights and my training videos that, we train 5-6 days a week. We do everything from, normal drill work to situational reaction stuff. I have a coach that I've been blessed with. His name's Malik Foreman. He played 4 years at UT. He did a little bit of time in the pros and, ended, having to leave because of an injury, and went into full-time coaching. And so he kind of took me under his wing as a defensive back. And my position is a linebacker. So it's been great to learn from a defensive back on how they move, how they think, the things that I need to know for defense. But it's pretty incredible, because when I tell people that, up until this point, I have not, played under a professional name or under a university, they're just kind of bewildered about what my dream is and how I'm going to get there. And so it's like the ultimate underdog story, if you ask me. It's one of those things that when you think about it, it's like, man, it almost seems impossible. But then, as a man of strong faith, I know that, nothing is impossible for God, and to God, all the glory goes to, man. I mean, whatever comes from this situation, whatever comes from, the next couple weeks, whatever comes from this season, it's God's glory, man. It's the dream that He's put in my heart. He's given me the breath to work for it every single day. And what people don't realize is, coming from where I come from, there's not anybody ever in the NFL as we know it now that was a Syrian that has played in the NFL, and especially in a time where the Middle East is in such turmoil, and especially as a Christian coming from the Middle East, it's just like I feel like God has kind of prepared the way for me to kind of have a platform, be able to do the thing I love, but also help other people. So yeah, man, it's pretty crazy. That's kind of my story in a nutshell. There's a lot of details to it. There's a lot of things that I could go on about and talk about the details and the nitty gritty, and and there's been some really, really hard times, man. I mean, walking into this combine that I went to, most of these people do this thing on the regular. I mean, people that were there, this was just another Tuesday for them. This was my first ever combine. This was my first time ever walking into an arena with people like this, of this caliber. And so it was a pretty crazy moment to realize, hey, I don't come from the same background, nationality, ethnicity wise, I don't come from the same background, but also, from the same background of sports. It's something that I had to work for, when I realized that, hey, this is my one life, and I got to pursue my dreams. That's when I realized, hey, it's time to lose that weight when I was 17. It's time to do it. It's time to make it happen. And after I did lose that weight, it's been building myself up, building my body, my skill set up to actually play at the highest level of this sport. So it's going from absolutely nothing to the top level. And, for me, you say that and it's mind blowing, man. But, at that same time, that just shows me how big my God is, man, because I'm finally getting to that level where I'm catching the eyes that I need to catch. And people don't necessarily know the story. And I'm sure that one day, Lord willing, if everything goes right, they'll see it in this first interview ever that I come out and actually talk about my story, man. So that's kind of who I am. I'm grew up in North Georgia. I went to Lee University, and then I'm training out of Chattanooga, Tennessee, at the D1 at Chattanooga. It's very one of the best gyms you could ever possibly ask for. I called them one day and was like, "Hey, at that point I had never put pads on. I had never, done anything. I said I have a short stint in rugby, and but I'm gonna be a professional football player. I'm gonna play for the NFL." And the guy who was on the phone was just kind of like, you could tell he was kind of stunned. He said, "You know what?" He said, he's like, "I got a guy for you." And not even a couple of days later, my trainer texted me, and he had just got there from Knoxville, from where he moved back home. And we just started working together, man. It's been God's plan ever since. So I'm blessed. This gym, D1. I just got done training here. I'm outside of it right now. They're very Christ-centered. Bible verses whenever you walk in, and they have the faith. They've believed in me. They've let me train here, and so it's just kind of like a crazy story, man. So when I tell people, kind of in a nutshell, it's like I'm a Syrian American who has never played officially the game of football in a professional arena, who is shooting for his dream of being a professional linebacker in the NFL.
Dude, I love that. As like, I think when people talk about God and football, like that's hearing like that, but people don't believe in you. It's like that's not how it works. That's not how God works. God does things where you think, oh, I'm not qualified, or he does the exact opposite. You never know how God works. So hearing that in the Bible verse, man, that definitely got me pumped and excited. And wish more people through your story and through this interview, and hopefully people can realize that no matter what this world looks like, man, God knows exactly what he's doing. And just because we don't see it, just because we don't feel it, doesn't mean he's not working.
Exactly. And, man, I want to thank you, first of all. We didn't really talk in the beginning, but, that's my boy, That Dude 2020. I like the name. Where did the name come from?
So originally February of 2020, I was like, you know what? I didn't enjoy working with kids anymore. And so I was like, you know what? I love football. I love sports. First game was the '06 Rose Bowl. So I was like, you know what? Let's record a podcast in my room at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm one dude and nobody else does it. Many late nights. And it started in 2020. And it just went up from there, man. You never know like what God can do. But I think the biggest thing is, like you said, your story and people not believing you, it's like, well, then that's their fault. Because
Yeah.
I've said this off camera. I believe in your story. Not just your story, you and whatever you do, man. I got your back. And it's just people need to understand, like, no matter what, God knows what he's doing, especially tomorrow, folks. Tomorrow was the day that he rose from the dead. So I don't care what nobody else says. There's something about that faith, man. It's something miraculous. That's why guys like Russell Wilson and of course yourself are one in a billion, especially when you hear Matthew McConaughey talking about, oh, friends were about to clap for his work. Oh wait, but they don't want to get not get that future job because you talked about God. But man, it's a story of convincing faith in football, and that's where it started.
Yeah, man, I totally agree. And I like that name. I like what it stands for. I like what you're doing, man. I think that as I can tell from, everything that I've, researched and looked at you, you're a man of faith, and you're not afraid to say, anything about God. You're not afraid to show that. And I think that football needs men of faith to step up. I think for a long time, football has been one of those things that when the touchdowns are scored, we point at the sky and, give God the credit. But in the way that we live our life, and the way that, football players and coaches and staff and everybody involved, fans, live their life, it's almost not, there's a lot of times it's not a true reflection of what Christ is and what Christianity is. And so it's good to see guys like you, man, who are, sold out to the faith, and pursuing the things that they love, but also honoring God. And like I tell everybody, man, you know, for me, if my dream ends up in the NFL, if I end up playing in the CFL, if I end up playing indoor, if I end up playing semi-pro, you know what I'm saying? If there's no check that comes with it, I'm still gonna do it. If I was a janitor, I would still play semi-pro football, man. It's about the love at the end of the day, and that's the thing about my story is there's no room to praise myself. I'm not the athlete that grew up, went to the best private schools, and then went to the Alabamas or the Clemsons or the Georgias. I went to a school that doesn't even have a football program. Let me say that again, because I don't think a lot of people understand the dream that I'm shooting for. I went to a college that doesn't even have a football program. I went to a high school that's football program was so back in the day, they hadn't had a winning season in over 15 years. They hadn't even established, that it was like there was so many racial boundaries at that point too, that it was just, there was a lot of, it's rural North Georgia. And there was a lot of things that, that I won't necessarily speak on, but weren't, the most progressive at the time. I come from the absolute bottom of the barrel. And so when I say that, that means when God put the dream in my heart when I was a kid and I went through everything that I had to go through, and to wake up and say, all right, no matter what, I'm going to go for this dream. No matter what happens to me, no matter what happens to my body and to my life, I'm pursuing this dream. I don't come from the privilege. I don't come from the ability to just do well and be guided by a coach and then make it to the next step and then ease you into the next step. And then, you go to the next step in your process. And then before you know it, you're in college, you're getting coached and, on combine skills, you're getting coached on your 40, you're getting coached on your, all your things. I had to go and pursue everything. I had to walk into a facility and say, hey, I've never played the game, but I'm going to the NFL. And in that story, there's no room to praise yourself. There's no glory for Kamel. There's no glory for me, because that's glory for God. God is the only way that I will be able to reach my dreams. The fact that I've been invited to that combine that I attended, the fact that, I've been accepted into a tryout for the spring league also in April, which I'm about to go to in a couple days in Detroit, is just amazing, because I don't, and I feel kind of like in the scriptures, how Moses felt like he didn't deserve to go speak to Pharaoh. That's how I feel. I feel like every time I walk into one of those facilities that I do not deserve to be there, but because of the grace of God, because of the power of God, he has put me in places that I don't deserve to be. And I'm not, like when I say that, I'm not taking away from anybody who has done, the high school and went to the college and done all that path, because a lot of legends were made that way, right? I think that's kind of the normal path because of just how rigorous and how tough this sport is. You're kind of groomed for it, but I was kind of groomed through the adversity, right? So the things that I saw, were against me at first, I looked and now I see that God used those things to build my story for his glory. Because at the end of the day, it's all about him. It's all about, okay, he took me out of adversity and he took me from an impossible position of going from, not even, it's like people who pursue this thing their whole life still can't achieve this goal. And to go from absolute adversity to achieving that goal, that's only something God can create. And I'm still believing for that. Every day I'm working for that. Every single day I'm grinding for that. I've had a crazy week. Been training with my coach. We're getting ready for, it was not even a month ago I was at that last combine. And so just the recovery that comes from going to one of those and then turning around and going to this next tryout. I fly out this Saturday, a week from today actually, and I go to Detroit to do that. And it's like every day is work and recovery, exploiting weaknesses, trying to figure out. And then when I step into those realms, then it's the spiritual fight, right? Because then it's the enemy saying, hey, you don't deserve this. You've not earned this. These people around you are much better. These people know what they're doing. But then it's that voice of God that tells me you were created for this. You're the one. And so, my ultimate goal, is I want to make it to the NFL, but I want God's name to be the only reason I made it to the NFL. I want people to know that, no matter how much I love football, that was all given to me by the God that I love more than football, right? Because football is my love. It's my dream. I've wanted it since I was young. I've wanted to play professional since I was young. That's what I want to do with my life. That's what brings me the most happiness. But above that, I feel like sometimes, we can worship the hand of God more than we worship the heart of God, if that makes sense. So, my dream is to keep my eyes on God, and hopefully he takes me to where, he wants me to be, and, all that comes true. So, at the end of the day, I'm just praying that, the NFL is where it goes. And, I'm hoping that everything goes, that's the direction that I want to go, whether it's this year, whether it's next year. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where it goes, timeline wise. I know that I'll still be pursuing it.
Man, you get me all fired up here talking about that. I wish what people understand that's the biggest thing, but because of course we could talk about that all day, because there's just, I'm telling you, you never know, man. I mean, one podcast, what you're doing, I never went to a college. So what? You don't have to get a degree and do all of this, and that's just what God can do. But question, Dio, is despite all these franchises, there's a lot of guys coming up in the draft. And of course, like I said, whatever happens to you, no matter what, you got my support. But if you had to pick a franchise, whether you watched as a kid or when you grew up in Georgia, who would you like the opportunity to play for when given that chance?
That dude, that's a good question. I've actually been asked this question before, and I think I went with the Seattle Seahawks for the last time I said this, after I gave a shout out to the Dirty Birds of Atlanta, because Atlanta will always have my heart. I mean, the Falcons, it's the team I grew up watching. I live an hour and 25 minutes away from Atlanta. It's definitely the number one team for me always. So I always pick a second team, because it's always like, that's not really that interesting, because they know that answer. It's always going to be Atlanta. It doesn't matter about management. It doesn't matter about players. Atlanta being Atlanta, and what it means to me, that's the team. But I always go with, the last time I said the Seattle Seahawks. That's a team that I really admire. And I said, I like that they had the Griffin brothers playing together on there, which they just signed with the Jets, I believe, or no, the Jaguars.
Yeah.
So they're both down in Jacksonville right now. I love the dynamic duo between both of them. I love what Shaquem has been able to overcome with his limiting factors, man, in the linebacker position, coming in with only having one hand, and then just killing it at his combine. It's absolutely given no reason for anybody to doubt him. And then to do as well as he's done. I mean, it's just one of those things that he's one of the linebackers currently that I admire. Of course, I'm always going to say Ray Lewis is my favorite linebacker, for sure. I mean, I feel like if a linebacker says that Ray Lewis isn't his favorite linebacker, I'm trying to figure out if he's really a linebacker or not, But, besides that fact, I would say the Atlanta Falcons, number one. Other than that, man, I like what the Tennessee Titans have going on. I really do. On defense, they're pretty good. Obviously their offense is great. But I always have to give respect to the Tennessee Titans for sure. They're probably one of my second favorite teams. But I mean, at the same time, it's just hard to pick one, because everybody wants to be coached by the Bill Belichick with the Patriots. Everybody wants to be on the Bucks. Everybody wants to play with the GOAT Tom Brady. It's like every team has its specialty. But if I had to narrow it down to one, it's of course going to be Atlanta for sure.
There are definitely a couple of teams I come up with, did some research on you and them, and the one I was just about to mention, Tennessee Titans, because as you've seen, if you watch any film, they struggled to get to the quarterback. And
Yep.
Folks said last year, I said, I believed you, David Klein's a good dude, but I said, as a player, he never got to reach his full, never reached that full potential. I think
I agree.
when we're critical of players, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not talking about him as a person. This is as a player, as a dude. I've never met him, so I'm not going to judge him. I haven't
Right.
But as a player, they signed him to a 1-year, 14 deal, and then we never hear from him during the year. Tennessee last year, they struggled to get to the quarterback. And the Packers, man, I'll be honest, folks, the Packers defense is worse than after somebody has chili because they cannot get to the quarterback. They made Raheem Mostert look like Jerry Rice. And so that's why I say Tennessee, in my opinion, for you, and because they struggled to get to the quarterback. Tackling for the Packers, man, it's just they are so undisciplined. You saw it again last year.
Yeah.
And you have Kevin, who got demolished by Scott Miller. And who did the Packers re-sign in free agency? That same guy that got demolished by Scott Miller. Like, what?
Well, here's the thing, man. I think there's something that I learned kind of being on the semi-pro team that I was on that I feel like a lot of people don't really realize. When you're playing semi-pro football, you're basically at the bottom of the barrel of football, right? You're talking about, and I don't mean that derogatory in no sense because I was there. I'm talking about you're not getting paid, you're not getting a scholarship, you're not getting fed, your gas isn't paid to get there, you drive yourself to the games, you drive yourself to the practices. You know what I'm saying? It means like it's the most basic, like the people who love football are out there. Right? It's not anybody who's doing it for any other reason because there's no other reason to be out there, if that makes sense. There's absolutely no other reason to be out there. So I've always been very appreciative of the time that I got to spend with that team. Though it was short, I'm glad of it because I had to start training for the combine. But something that you'll learn about defense, and I feel like this is something that could really benefit the Tennessee Titans. They have some weapons. I mean, is it a defense like the Bucks have? No. Okay, what the Bucks did in the 2021 Super Bowl was probably one of the most smooth defenses I've ever seen. No, there's not necessarily any really big stars on that team, but they all played so well and they passed off and they just were so fluid that it worked so well, right? But that's hard to come by because, in defense especially, let's say you have a great defensive end, like you mentioned, the great one at the Tennessee Titans. He is only as good as his linebackers. Mm-hmm. Linebackers are only as good as their defensive backs. And that's really what it boils down to. Because no matter how great that defensive end is, he cannot get to the quarterback if they know he's the only one coming, right? If they know he's the one that's giving 120%, right? And these linebackers, they're kind of just hanging out and chilling. They're kind of just going through the motions, right? Mm-hmm. Then it's going to be no problem to hold them back. But if you have a weapon of a linebacker or two linebackers, you have a great, DB that's a weapon also. You have a great defensive end. They don't know where it's coming from, right? So it might look like it's coming from you, but it's coming from him. So then you can begin to exploit the weaknesses of the offense. But if it's only coming from one position, and I think the Tennessee Titans kind of have that issue is it's not that their defense, their position isn't great. It's that the family aspect, the vibe of it, the synergy of it just doesn't feel right, if that makes sense. Something that you noticed in the Super Bowl is between the two linebackers, communication was great. Between the linebackers and the defensive ends, communication was great. They were there for each other. They supported each other, and they made the plays together. You know what I'm saying? Even if the linebackers had to sprint across the field and that tackle was made. They still got there. They still supported those guys on their defense. And I think it's important to realize that. I think for the Tennessee Titans, like you talked about, I don't think it's necessarily anything other than the vibe of the defense, man. Sometimes you just got to have that heart of the defense, and somebody has to bring. There's always those people who bring people together, and they need that for sure. I think that's a definite something that they need. Is they have some weapons, they just need to be able to bring those weapons and use them together, because people are just getting better. Offenses are getting faster. They're getting better. They're getting, the plays are getting smarter. It's just, if you are not 100% committed to the guy next to you, subconsciously, you might not be willing to give the inches or the effort to actually make a difference, right? Because you might get there, but that extra inch, that extra effort might be the difference between a 70-yard touchdown and a deflection, right? Because you're willing to put your body on the line for somebody else, for the guys on your defense. You're willing to get in there and really sacrifice yourself. And when you get that mentality, that's what transforms defenses. So like you said, with the Packers, I mean, it looked like they were just undisciplined in their tackling, right? To me, that's more of not necessarily laziness, but it's almost like a cancer. It's almost like this mentality of, we're just out here doing a job. And it's not, hey, I'm fighting for the guy next to me, right? And I think a lot of people talk about that, but it's different. It's different when you're in the trenches. And to tie it back to what I was saying about semi-pro, when you're out there, there's no reason but the love of football to be out there. So there's no reason to give everything to not give everything that you have for the guy next to you. You might not know him. He might have lived in the same town as you, and you've never seen him before, right? Might be your first time meeting this guy. He's not getting a paycheck. You're not getting a paycheck. Both of you got to go to work on Monday, right? And you're playing, and it's just, you're out there, but you're fighting for that guy. And I think that's something that level of football teaches you, that maybe that level in college, if you're going to these big schools where you're being, taken care of, you're being taken to class, you're doing all this kind of stuff, that doesn't necessarily teach you to fight for the guy next to you. It almost teaches you to become more selfish. So sometimes we see these great athletes come into the league, but not be willing to fight for the guy next to them, right? Because that's what happens, and that's what causes defenses to crumble. Because on offense, if everybody does what they're supposed to do, and you trick the defense, no matter how pissed you are at the guy next to you, no matter how bad the energy is, the vibes between those players are, you still probably can make that play, right? Only takes one guy to get into the end zone, right? It takes 11 guys to hold a good defense. I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, I'm not saying anything against offenses. I'm just saying on defense, the energy and the communication, the nonverbal communication, just the vibes between each other has to be so much stronger to be efficient, because you are having to figure out everything that is going on the field without knowing it. So he might pick up on something you don't pick up on, but if you can read each other, if you can flow together, if you have that love for each other, I believe that's when defenses are successful. And that's why you see defenses that are when we're watching football, it's usually just an offensive scoring game. There's a lot of points being scored, but then you find a defense, like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, they held the Chiefs to no touchdowns. I mean, if you would have said that last year, this time, I mean, you would have not been able to believe, that the Chiefs went to the Super Bowl again, but didn't even score a touchdown, right? That's what happens when defenses work together.
People need to understand, I say this all the time, and you was reiterating what I've been saying. Football is a brotherhood, which is why I was so frustrated with the Cowboys after the Andy Dalton situation, because when he was down on the field, there was not a single player going over to make sure he was okay. Not the coaching staff, not the coordinators, not the players. And
Right.
that just tells me like you're going to that vibe. It's not the vibe is not just on the field. It is going out to dinners, having these talks about God, doing all these things off the field,
Yeah.
translate the things on the field. And it just that to me is what frustrated me, my man, because it shows me that there's no leadership in that organization. There's no brotherhood. If you don't have that, you could be Tom Brady. You could have the greatest arm on the planet. But if y'all hate each other's guts and don't communicate, then you're never going to win a Super Bowl at that point.
Well, and I'll agree with you on that. I am not a Cowboys fan. I'm probably and out of respect, I don't like the Cowboys. I'll say that for reasons like that. It's just you know I'm definitely not a Cowboy fan. If I ever had the opportunity to play for the Cowboys, would I play for the Cowboys? Yes, I would, and I would try to bring the change that I see necessary to that team. I think that I don't know where it starts. I wish I knew more about the Cowboys. I wish I had actually got to meet some of the staff, some of the players to actually know what it is. But from what I see, like that Andy Dalton situation, man, when you get a bunch of guys who are so focused on the external reasons of football, and that's what I'm saying ties back to that semi-pro thing, is when there's high contracts involved and there's money involved and there's image involved, and we're talking about sponsorships that are worth millions of dollars, right?
Mm-hmm.
Football starts to become something that it shouldn't be, right? And it's about the money, it's about the sponsorships, it's about the fame, it's about the clout that comes with it. At the basic foundation of football, it's a brotherhood, right? It's the ultimate team sport, right? It's the ultimate team sport. Out of any sport there is, it is the team sport. Everybody on the field has to be doing exactly what they need to do to make that offense or defense operate the way it needs to operate. In soccer, you can have a freaking great striker or whatever, and he can just mow that thing down the field and score three goals, and hey, and nobody else scored that game, and hey, you won. Great job. But in football, there's 11 guys that are coming for you when you're on offense. There's 11 dudes that are coming for your team. They want that ball, and it's like it's a different dynamic. And so at the basic foundation of it, it's a brotherhood, and it's to protect that guy next to you. You're a family. You protect each other. You fight for each other. When money gets in the way, when fame gets in the way, when other things get in the way, you start to see the selfishness, right? So for that situation, I would say from what I saw, I'm not saying this is what happened. I'm not saying this is the issue with the Cowboys. There's many other things with the Cowboys before this situation that people have been kind of, have spoken about in a negative way. There's a lot of things that they have done, a lot of the, and not necessarily the franchise, but the things that they have allowed, how they've allowed players to kind of just sit out, at the beginning of training camps and stuff because they want more money. When they're already making more money, those players are just sitting out and saying, "Hey, I don't care about the team. Pay me my money, even though you're already paying me a ton of money," right? And putting that pressure to take cap space that could be used in other positions to make the team more powerful, right? That's why I've always honored people like Brady who said, "You know what? I'm going to rearrange this contract so we can have more cap space," right? Things like that. And I think that situation goes down to they probably saw Dalton as ruining things, incentives, maybe potential for money, potential for other opportunities for themselves personally. And they just showed how they felt on that field, by not assisting him, by not coming up to him as a brother. I mean, at the basic level, he's their brother in that game, right? But when you let other things get in the way, you start to forget about that. And I think that's probably what happened. That whole environment has just been laced with some pretty toxic traits.
Couldn't agree more, my man. But like I said, tell people I can't thank you enough for coming on. We'll definitely do this again. And I know the draft is coming. I'll be watching. I'll be whatever you go under, whatever it is. I'll be supporting you, man. And folks, no matter what, no matter the fame and the money, these things don't matter, but make sure you do it for God's glory, my man. And let's do this again. And good luck, man. I'll be supporting you no matter what.
I appreciate it, man. Just thank you for having me on. Like I said, just be praying for me. I got an important tryout next week for the spring league. I'm not sure if you're very familiar with the spring league, but it's kind of like this feeder where I can kind of go get some more film, some experience and stuff like that that's necessary coming from my background. Probably something scouts want to see before I get signed to a team. It's one of those extra steps that my story in particular I have to take, if that makes sense. So I'm believing that the tryout will go good. I'm believing that I'll get a position in that league, and then from there we'll see how it goes. So be praying for me for that. Thank you for having me on, man. It's always an honor to talk to you, man. You're one of the greatest, most hospitable, genuine guys that I've come in contact with. I know the road ahead for you is going to be full of blessings. I hope that one day we're fighting to get in each other's schedules because we're so busy. So that would be a great time, man. So that dude 2020, I appreciate you having me on, man.
Thanks so much, man. Good luck. And John and or anybody else, if you're looking, we need that position. So thank you so much, man.
Anytime, bro. Appreciate it.